Let's go down right now to the Nasdaq market site in Times Square, where David Westin, the host of Wall Street Week, standing by right now with a very special guest.
Thank you so much, Romain. Yes, we do have a very special guest. She is Adena Friedman. She is the chair and CEO of Nasdaq, which announced its earnings today. So, Adena, thank you very much for having us down here to your headquarters.
So great to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Congratulations on the earnings. You beat expectations as far as I can understand. At the same time, as I looked at it, it looked like it's a tale of two companies. You've got the more traditional trading facilities, which are fine, but not growing really fast. And then you have the software part of your business, which is really growing fairly robustly. What's the connection between those two parts of your business?
Sure. Well, just a quick round the horn on the results. We had 4% top line growth and then 6% growth within our solutions businesses. And there are two highlights for the quarter. One is our index business that returned to growth after a couple of tough quarters. And then the other is our anti-financial crime business, which grew 19% in the quarter and continues to have a really nice growth trajectory for the business. And as we think about how we've been able to bring, start with the foundation of the markets and then bring new services to our clients, we actually look at it across three key themes. What is the role of an exchange in a marketplace? To provide liquidity, transparency, and integrity. And so as we've been branching out and providing more technology services to our corporate clients, investment managers, and to banks and brokers, we've really keyed in on making sure that our markets and the market tech we provide to other markets provides and promotes liquidity. And then we have transparency tools to support corporates and investors as they're managing through the complexities of the capital markets. And then on the integrity side, we have our anti-financial crime suite that really helps banks and brokers really solve one of their biggest problems, which is making sure that they can root out criminal behavior across the financial system.
On the trading side, talk about cloud, because that's sort of a foundation, as I understand it, that is really allowing you to deliver some of the things you need to deliver.
Yeah, so we've been migrating our own markets to the cloud, but we spent really, when I became CEO, we really decided to invest heavily in our next generation trading system. So we have our entire trade lifecycle technology as a cloud-ready, cloud-first architecture, and we're now implementing that across our clients. And then we're also implementing it in our own markets. We've moved one of our options markets to the cloud. We are moving on a second one at the end of the year, and we continue to partner with AWS to bring our markets into the cloud over the coming years. And then we're now able to deliver markets out in the world, regulated markets in a cloud format, which really is kind of the next generation of how the markets are going to operate. So that's been a great growth driver. Then within our anti-financial crime business, that's a cloud platform. What's great about that is we have 2,500 clients. We're able to bring the data together and look at patterns of behaviors across banks, not just within a bank. And that's where you have to realize that criminals just don't bank in one bank. So we have 2,500 banks where we can look at transaction data and find criminal behaviors through modern AI algorithms and get smarter and smarter and smarter in rooting out those criminals.
Talk about the criminals, as it were, and the financial integrity side of your business here, Verafin. You bought Verafin. That accounted for some of the growth that you saw from these reports that you just had. How big can Verafin get for you?
Yeah, well, so Verafin, within the anti-financial crime business, we have two solutions. We have our surveillance solution, and we have the Verafin, what we call FRAML, fraud and AML solution. That grew about 23% in the quarter, and it is a business that has a giant total market opportunity. I mean, you're talking about a $4 trillion problem out in the world, and about a $7 to $8 billion serviceable addressable market, which means direct addressable market that Verafin can serve. So it has a huge growth trajectory. And what's important, though, is the banks need more and more sophisticated technology. The cloud capabilities and the consortium data is what really makes Verafin unique. And I was just up in Canada visiting with the team, and one of the people that we have work with us is actually a former victim of human trafficking. She now runs an organization that helps other victims and then really works with law enforcement to say, how are the criminals behaving? So if you're really going to solve this criminal problem, you have to get into the mind of the criminal. And so what she does is she helps us actually think about how the models are operating, how the transaction, how do criminals use the banks to perpetrate their crimes, what kind of behaviors do they exhibit, so we can tune our models, make them smarter, and continue to make it so that the banks have a better ability to fight the human trafficking, which is obviously one of the biggest problems that this society faces.
So you're seeing real growth in things like Verafin, so the integrity aspects of your business. You also announced that you are buying Adenza, a fairly substantial transaction here. Explain how that fits into your strategy overall and what that can do for Nasdaq.
Yeah, well, that fits squarely into this kind of theme of liquidity and integrity. So Adenza is a risk management and regulatory reporting platform that serves banks and brokers all over the world. And so when we think about how do you manage risk, liquidity risk, your capital markets risk, trading risk, Adenza has a platform called Calypso that squarely meets the needs of banks and helping them manage their risk as they're managing their transactions across the capital markets. And then they also have a platform called Axiom that helps banks manage all their regulatory reporting obligations. That actually fits very nicely with our surveillance and anti-fin crime business because it really is a regulatory obligation compliance and what they call RegTech. It's a growing space. Again, giant total market opportunity of about $16 billion, $8 billion in and of itself from a serviceable addressable market, growing really quickly. And it really does allow us to partner very holistically with the banks in helping them solve their biggest problems.
Adena, it's hard to have a discussion about the markets these days without talking about crypto in some way, shape, or form. And you made an announcement today about pulling back in part of crypto. At the same time, you're going forward, for example, with BlackRock applying for an ETF. What does Nasdaq want to do with crypto, and what do you not want to do with crypto?
Yeah, so we do want to help really advance the ecosystem with our technology. We provide trading technology, surveillance technology, and then we also, of course, will work with BlackRock, Valkyrie, and others to bring tradable products onto our exchange so that the potential for there to be a Bitcoin ETF that allows for retail investors to kind of invest in the asset class through a very resilient marketplace. I think, though, that as we thought about being an operator of a custodian solution, being a custodian in the U.S. market, we also do like to be able to operate in a pretty well-regulated environment and a well-understood regulatory framework. And right now, that regulatory framework's changing. So we decided to halt those efforts right now and really just focus in on the tech business and on the listings business.
So that's a fascinating point, because I have to ask, if and when the regulations get clarified, federal level, state level, does that mean at some point down the road you might reconsider and go into it more aggressively?
Well, we've actually built all the products. We're now productizing them to be able to sell to other market operators. The question is, would we at some point, become a market operator? I think it really depends on what the regulatory framework looks like, and we'll have to see how that goes. I think that'll take a while to shake out.